Welcome everyone. This is the news report for day 332 of the war in Ukraine, brought to you by The Account. Thank you for tuning in. Today I have 3 articles I want to highlight. One article is about the Dnipro tragedy, taking a look at the children who lost their lives. Another is reporting on the Territorial Defence Forces defending Bakhmut. And the last one is an interesting article why the West should not fear the demise of Putin. Nothing noteworthy to highlight has happened today, so we will go over the usual minor updates grouped into the situation inside Ukraine, which includes an article on possible corruption in the Ministry of Defense, Russia and Belarus, with articles about the latest missile carrier deployments and an update to the Wagner PMC, and the international developments, with some updates on the Leopard issues. Nothing was reported out of the occupied territories, so I will be skipping this part. As usual, we take a look at the flashpoints along the front first. Svatove. Despite Russian tries to change the situation, Novoselivsk seems to be firmly in Ukrainian control. Attacks were repelled around the settlement. Kremina. Ukraine repelled attacks around Chervonopopivka and Bilohorivka. The General Staff of Ukraine once again reported a Russian shelling in the area of Holikove. Also, Wargonzo has reported that Dnipro was shelled, making it likely Russia has been pushed out of the settlement once again. Solidar. Russia claims they managed to occupy Blahodatne. Ukraine most likely has retreated to fortified positions on higher ground west of the settlement. Bakhmut. Klishchivka remains a focus point. Russia has a firm hold over parts of the settlement, however I do believe parts of it continues to be a grey zone, especially the parts facing Ukrainian fortifications on the hills in the west. Orikhiv. The head of the Joint Press Center of the Defense Forces of the Tavria region, Yevgeny Yerin, has confirmed a Russian offensive is ongoing in Zaporizhia. The enemy is no longer using reconnaissance units but has started sending shock assault troops. These units try to advance and test the defenses while Russia subjects Ukrainian positions to heavy artillery fire. So far, all Russian advances were discovered and repelled. And before we move on, I wanted to share this post on Twitter with you. Brady Africk has published a map with pictures of all known Russian-built fortifications in the occupied territories. And now for the highlighted articles, starting with one published by the Ukrainska Pravda, titled "Their whole lives were ahead of them, or should have been. The children killed by the Russian missile that hit a Dnipro apartment block. People are more precious than gold," reads the inscription on a card placed next to the flowers and votive lamps that locals in Dnipro have been bringing to the site of the high-rise building destroyed by a Russian missile. Most of the offerings there are toys in memory of the children killed by Russia. So far, 6 children are known to have died in the attack. This article tells the story of the children whose lives were cut short by the Russian missile on January 14th. The next article was also published by the Ukrainska Pravda, titled "Donbas is us, and we are fighting for our country. How Territorial Defence Forces defend Bakhmut." The Great Battles project of the Territorial Defence Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine visited the area of Bakhmut where fierce battles have been ongoing for many months. The goal of the article is to tell you about a unit that has held the city's defenses since the start of this full-scale war and is hardly ever mentioned by journalists. And the last article I want to point out is published by Foreign Affairs, titled "Don't Fear Putin's Demise. Victory for Ukraine, Democracy for Russia." This is an interesting article by Gary Kasparov and Mikhail Khodorovsky, and why the West should not fear the fall of Putin. According to the authors, the regime of Russian President Vladimir Putin is living on borrowed time. The tide of history is turning, and everything from Ukraine's advances on the battlefield to the West's enduring unity and resolve in the face of Putin's aggression points to 2023 being a decisive year. If the West holds firm, Putin's regime will likely collapse in the near future. And now for the news segment, starting as usual with the latest updates out of Ukraine. It seems the first Sea Kings from the United Kingdom have arrived in Ukraine. During a meeting of the Prosecutor's General's office in Ukraine, it was reported that police has already registered 155 cases of sexual violence committed by the Russian military. According to Ukrenergo, the power deficit increased significantly due to emergency repairs to a unit at one of the thermal power plants. The Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov is satisfied with the results of the Ramstein meeting. He called some of the military aid announced behind closed doors very inspiring. Also, as a result, Ukrainian soldiers will start training on Leopard tanks. Today, the funeral for the leadership and servicemen of the Ministry of Internal Affairs was held. President Zelensky said, "Every day we lose people whom we will always remember and regret that they are not coming back." As a reminder, the leadership of the Ministry of Internal Affairs died during a helicopter crash on January 18th. Andriy Yusov, representative of the Chief Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, stated that his agency believes the escalating topic of a possible attack from Belarus is a Russian informational and psychological operation. Ukrainian newspaper ZNUA reported on January 21st that Ukraine's Ministry of Defense purchased food for the military at prices that are between 2 and 3 times higher than those at Kyiv grocery stores. In turn, Ukraine's Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence has summoned the top officials of the Defense Ministry to explain the allegations. And now for the latest out of Russia and Belarus. Dmitry Medvedev, Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, has referred to the special military operation as the new patriotic war. As a reminder, the war against Napoleon and the two world wars are called the patriotic wars in Russia as well. The US is planning to designate the Wagner PMC as an international criminal organization. In response, Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner PMC, has sent a letter to John Kirby, the coordinator of the US National Security Council, asking what crimes Wagner allegedly has committed. Russia has reduced its missile carrier in the Black Sea from 6 to 5, with a total amount of up to 36 caliber missiles now. A Russian sabotage and reconnaissance unit has tried to infiltrate Ukraine through Sumy Oblast. The unit retreated when it came under fire. According to the Luhansk Oblast Military Administration, the Russian military has begun deploying mobilized soldiers to the front lines without providing them with food or equipment. And to wrap up the news segment, the latest international developments. The Ministry of Defense of the Czech Republic has denied reports that its country is ready to transfer the Leopard 2 tanks it will receive from Germany to Ukraine. The Leopards are part of the German Ringtausch program and intended as compensation for the delivery of Soviet-style T-72 tanks to Kyiv. According to the head of the Bundestag Defense Committee, Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, Germany should at least allow other countries to supply Ukraine with German-made Leopard 2 tanks. Ukraine should immediately be given German-made Leopard tanks to speed up the end of the war with Russia, the foreign ministers of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania said in a statement. Following the Ramstein meeting, the Polish National Defense Minister expressed his hopes that Germany will agree on providing Leopard 2 tanks and a coalition for supplying tanks to Ukraine will form. The Ukrainian President's Office Chief Andriy Yermak has organized a briefing for a delegation of US senators to tell them about the war. According to a statement by the US Ambassador to the OSCE, Michael Carpenter, he is expecting that Washington will support the idea of allies transferring F-16 aircrafts to Ukraine. Moldova is waiting for Ukraine's victory in order to peacefully settle the Transnistrian conflict, Moldova's foreign minister said. In case of a defeat, Russia would likely have to exit from the Moldovan territory. At the same time, Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is making Moldova think about whether the country needs to drop its neutral status and join the broader alliance. That is according to the country's president Maia Sandu when asked about Moldova's possible accession to NATO. And now for the daily intelligence updates, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. In recent days, the heaviest fighting has focused in 3 sectors. In the northeast, near Kreminna, Ukraine has likely made small gains and successfully defended against the Russian counterattack. Around the Donetsk Oblast in Bakhmut sector, Russian and Wagner proxy forces have likely been reconstituting in the town of Soledar after capturing it earlier in the week. In the south, in Zaporizhia Oblast, both sides have massed significant forces, which have conducted artillery exchanges and skirmishes, but have avoided any large-scale offensive effort. Overall, the conflict is in a state of deadlock. However, there is a realistic possibility of local Russian advances around Bakhmut. And now for the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the Institute, the most likely reason why the Russian deployed air defense systems on top of several buildings throughout Moscow is to rally support and ramp up anti-Ukrainian sentiment in the Russian population and portray Russia's war against Ukraine as an existential threat. It is likely to contextualize the war in Ukraine in the Russian mythos of the Great Patriotic War, the Institute writes. And to wrap up the intelligence reports, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The enemy does not give up its invasion plans and concentrates the main efforts on attempts to completely occupy the Donetsk region. The enemy leads unsuccessful offensive actions in the Avdiivka direction. The enemy continues offensive attempts in the Bakhmut and Zaporizhia directions and increases the intensity of the use of aviation. In other directions, the enemy is defending. The Republic of Belarus continues to provide comprehensive support to Russian aggression. In addition to joint exercises, training of Russian units continues on the territory of Belarus. The enemy is strengthening the control of the civilian population in the temporarily occupied territories of the Kherson region. In particular, the enemy is trying to create a database of the places of residence of civilians, threatening to cut off electricity under the guise of implementing an electricity saving program. The so-called authority is taking coercive measures to sign the act of confirmation of the actual place of residence of a citizen. And that wraps up our news report. If you're interested in any of the articles and want to read up on them, you can find links in the description as always. Thank you for taking the time to listen in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.